Thank you, Mr. Steven. I am honored to have the opportunity to introduce Mr. Tim Berrett. Mr. Berrett has represented Canada at not one, not two, but 5 Olympic Games as a race walker, starting at the '92 Games in Barcelona, Spain. He also holds the Canadian record for number of World Championship appearances by a track and field athlete with 9. Mr. Berrett completed his PhD at the University of Alberta and has been living in Edmonton ever since. He has traveled all over the world representing Canada with his hard work, pride, and dedication. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Tim Berrett.
How many people cycle to school today? How many people wrestled on their way to school today? How many people jumped in the swimming pool on the way to school today? How many people walked to school? All right.
That's not fair.
So a lot of you walk to school. I did a lot of walking in my day. Now I'm out of the athletes you have here, I'm the only one that can probably actually show you what I did, because we don't have a swimming pool set up, we don't have a velodrome, I don't see a wrestling mat not set up. So I'll give you a quick walking demonstration. I might have to put the mic down, I don't know if that'll work for the broadcast, but anyway, we'll try. So in walking, as the introductor said, I walked in 5 Olympics. Does anyone know how far the race walking events are in the Olympics? I just drove from the other side of Edmonton to get here, and on my mileometer in my car it was 35 kilometers. Well, my race was further than that. I raced 50 kilometers in the Olympics. So way from the other side, it's probably further than here to the airport, this side of town. So when I'm racing, there are 2 things that a race walker has to do. They have to keep at least 1 foot in touch with the ground. So before a back foot comes off the ground, the front foot has to hit the ground, and your knee has to be straight at the front of your stride. And I'll give you a quick front-on demonstration. So it kind of looks a little bit like this. And if you look from behind, and we'll show the camera. If you look from behind, it kind of looks like that. But actually, it looks like your hips are doing this side-to-side thing, but they're actually going from front to back. Because what you're trying to do is get a little bit longer on each stride. And quite often when I go into schools, and I have actually been into TD Baker before, I went into, and I can't remember which teacher it was, I went into one classroom and there were about 8 or 9 kids in there. It was a couple of years ago. And I did a little demonstration in the class. And I'm not sure if those students would still be here, they might have moved on. But I'll do a demonstration, I'll have a quick math lesson as to how much extra I get on each stride and how much further down the road that'll put me at the end of the race. Now I've got, how long is it, Rick? 5 hours to do this presentation? Okay, so we should be able to get, 5 minutes? Yeah. Okay. So 5 minutes, I won't be able to go through all that. But each stride, you're just trying to get that little bit extra. And that's what being an athlete's all about. Like you've heard from the other athletes already about dedication and the words you've got at the back of the gym here. Acceptance, respect, dignity. Being an athlete's all about those things. And I just have one quick anecdote to tell you about overcoming obstacles, because that's what athletes have to do all the time. Things don't always work out. You've heard about the number of wrestling matches, diving competitions, cycling races that people do, and they don't always win. Well, in my sport, we didn't race that often. I only raced 3 or 4 times a year, my main distance. And I didn't win all of those either. And so more of my time was spent training than it was racing. And I always had to find a way to train in the environment that I was in. I lived in Edmonton for most of my career, but my coach lived in Saskatchewan. He lived in a small town in northern Saskatchewan called Stanley Mission. Has anyone ever heard of Stanley Mission? Yes? It's about 5 hours north of Saskatoon. And what we used to do, between my coach and I, we'd alternate between me visiting him visiting me in Edmonton, and we'd meet sometimes in Saskatoon. Well, it was my turn to go up to Stanley Mission this one time. And I drove up there, middle of the night, got there. Never been there before. Woke up the next morning, looked outside, and there's no roads. Normally I'd train either on a track or a road. There's no roads. And it was the time of the year when all the dirt roads, which is what Stanley Mission is, it's just dirt roads, they'd all turned to mud. So I looked at my coach and said, where am I going to train? He goes, don't worry, I've got a plan. So we drove a little bit out of town. Town's not very big, it's like 1,500 people. And he drove me to a lake. I said, oh, that looks good. So now where am I training? Is there a nice path around? No, there's no path. He said, there's no snow on the lake. So today you're training on the lake. Like the ice is thick enough, I've checked it. You're not going to fall through. And you're going to train on the lake. I said, okay. So we set up a little course around the lake, and I did my laps around the lake. And I was out there for maybe 2 hours. He sat in the middle with a little fire going, roasted some wieners, which I didn't get to eat because that was not part of my training diet. So we did the workout. And afterwards he said, how did that feel? I said, well, actually it worked out pretty well. A week later, I had a big race in Mexico. And it was our World Cup, which is every 2 years for race walking. So it's actually a bigger event than the Olympics because there's 5 athletes per country in our World Cup, whereas only 3 per country allowed to do the Olympics. And I had one of my best ever results at that event. I finished 5th in the World Cup. And people from other countries came up to me after and said, oh yeah, really good race. It was 35 degrees. You must have been doing some warm weather training. I said, well, actually, no, last week I was walking on a frozen lake in northern Saskatchewan. And they kind of looked at me and said, well, how did you go from that to this? I said, well, you just find a way to do what you need to do. And whether it's being an athlete or a student or an artist, you have to find a way to what Alex just talked about, to follow your passion. For me, my passion was trying to see how fast I could walk to do this. And the way I could do it on that particular week was find somewhere with my coach where I could train that I knew no one else in the world would be doing, especially that close to the competition. So I got to that competition, and I had that kind of thing in the back of my head that if I managed to find a way to train and get a really good workout in those conditions, it doesn't matter what I get to on race day, I'm going to be able to cope with that. So that's something that athletes, and any athlete here will probably have a story like that where they've been presented with some problems and they haven't walked away from their problems. In my case, they walked through my problems. You're always going to be presented with challenges, and there's always a way around those challenges. So just take that message away, and I think we have one more athlete to give you a little anecdote or a little pep talk. So thank you very much.
I guess this is kind of a throwdown time because when we found out that Tim Berrett was coming to our school, we have our own resident Olympian wannabe, Mr. Hartel. Everybody know Mr. Hartel? Yes. So yes. What you need to know is that Mr. Hartel every day he brags about how fast he can walk from his portable into the school. And I overheard him yesterday saying, there's nobody faster than him. So let's see if we can get Mr. Hartel to come up over here. Maybe Tim Berrett could come up. We could have him do a race walk. You guys want to see that? Yeah, come on, Mr. Hartel.
Looking at it towards us.
Well, how do you guys start over there? Now, students, you need to know that Mr. Hartel will always tell you, no matter whether he wins or loses, he still thinks he looks great. So, let's do a countdown. On 3, 2, 1, go! Oh! Woo! Let's give a big round of applause, you guys.